We're in Matthew's Gospel if you want to prepare yourself. And while they're receiving the offering, I will begin this message with the Gospel of Isaiah. You guys do know that he preached the gospel, right? Known in America as Isaiah. For who has believed what they heard from us, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. For he was wounded for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, and we have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. This passage lies in the background of what Matthew is writing in this section of our passage this morning, as we're going to talk about the one who has authority, and about that authority being manifested on earth as it is in heaven. So Matthew chapter 8, and beginning with verse 1. Let me get tethered here. All right. Yes. Now note that I'm backing up on you, see? I've already backslid. Before the sermon even starts, I backslid. I'm going to Matthew chapter 4. What I want you to see, and one of the things that I've been wanting you to catch hold of, is that Matthew is a master writer, and he has really amazingly constructed a gospel for us. And that he is saying things not only in the text of the scripture, but in the construction of the book. And he went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria. And they brought him all the sick and those afflicted with various diseases and pains, and those oppressed with demons, and those having seizures and paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and from Decapolis and from Jerusalem and Judea and from beyond the Jordan. Now, if you'll note, this is the passage that Matthew put right in front of the Sermon on the Mount, because Jesus did demonstration before proclamation. Now, the church is where we do proclamation and demonstration, but when you and I are in the world, the point is that we should do demonstration before proclamation, that we should manifest the love of God before we try to tell people something. Where evangelism goes wrong, where it really goes sideways, is when you go out there to tell people something that they're not looking to hear. But when you have done something, you can say something. Got it? Yeah, this is really the way. And this is the way God, so that's the way he did it. And then we came to this passage, and when Jesus finished these sayings, this is the last passage we looked at last week, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority, not as their scribes. So demonstration, proclamation, and then a statement about what they noticed about him was that he had authority. When somebody has authority, you lean into them. And by the way, our authority doesn't always come from our strength, but often from our brokenness. Okay? In in Matthew 8 and 9, where we're going, what we're going to see is that the next thing Jesus does is 10 miracles. Or, let me say, it's not that way. The next thing Matthew compiles for us is 10 miracles. Now, for me, I hear a slight echo of Moses in this, except in reverse. You know, Moses does the 10 miracles, and then he takes them to Sinai. Jesus is on the mountain, and then Matthew gives us 10 miracles. What Matthew is doing is he's demonstrating in the text that the authority that they recognized carries over into Jesus' life in all kinds of ways. Okay? And I'm always daunted when we talk about healing, but some stuff happened this week that helped me to lean back into the business of healing. This is a church that prays for the sick all the time. We anoint the sick. We believe in healing. We pray for healing. We expect healing. But anybody who does anything like that comes face to face with their failure, and comes face to face with their sometimes they say we feel like our results are you know what I'm talking about? Okay. And so this came starkly home to me. My wife, last Sunday when I left here, Gail, said, isn't this an anniversary for you? And I was, first of all, let me tell you, I was glad I'd forgotten this anniversary. Because I think about it every year. February the 4th in 1990, I was in the pulpit. And there's a lot of new people here. A lot of you who have been around while I've heard this story. But and can I tell you that for like almost 15 years, I never mentioned this. And then when I finally did, I found out I could survive it. And so people, actually, when I talk about this stuff, people say, well, thank you for being so vulnerable. Listen, I'm just as scared as you are of the truth. All right? And so 15 years ago, on last Sunday, or 28 years ago, on last Sunday's anniversary, I stood up in the pulpit. And I can remember that I was opening to John's Gospel, 10th chapter. And I started with these words. I said, Jesus has promised to get us home safe. In my Father's house are many mansions. Were not so, I would have told you. And then I said, I broke down. I began to break down. And in front of my people in my Baptist church in Jacksonville, Florida, I lost my mind. And I started talking crazy. The only thing I can remember coherently that I said was, how can I preach about the love of God when my heart is so full of hate? And then I broke down from what I'd been going through. And I started talking out of my head, and it wasn't tongues. It was truly madness. And 4 strong men came to the pulpit and took me by my arms and legs and carried me out the back door of the church. I think it took more than 4. And I literally had a mental breakdown in front of my church. You can imagine that this disturbed people who were looking for me to be their shepherd. And I can remember, of course, what's interesting is I can still remember it was February, and even in Florida, it's a little cool. And I remember the cold concrete when I was laying on the sidewalk in front of the church. And ambulance came. And when my wife and children pull up for the second service, I'm being loaded into an ambulance. There was no cell phones in those days. And they were en route by the time this was happening. And it led into, you can imagine, a really bad season. I would love to tell you that it was just over quickly and it was all was well. No, it was years unpacking. Years. And so what happened was I wrote about this I wrote a little note on it and put it on my Facebook page. And the response was so strong, I decided I've written about my own depression in 4 one-page columns, and I decided to repost those columns. And, I'm going to talk about healing this week. And a wonderful lady wrote to me, and about this time, a few years ago, she came to the city just to see Gail and I, and not just to see us, but in addition. And she brought her daughter. And her daughter was suffering badly from some of the stuff I was talking about and severe migraines. And y'all know I got excited about the migraines. Because I like to pray for people who have migraines. And I told her, I said, let me pray for you. And so I did. Anyway, the lady wrote me to say, you probably don't know this, but the migraine problem is solved. And I want you to know that. We're still walking through this other thing. And I wasn't surprised because my own walking through the mental health aspect not only was years, but it's been my life. I'm not really affected anything like I was. But it does explain some of my insanity to you. But it's real, folks. Okay? Now, what encouraged me, what happened was, this lady's wonderful note encouraged me to keep praying for people to be healed. It also encouraged me to keep telling the truth. Because what happened in that church was quite interesting. The reality was that I'm a strong personality, and I've always been a strong, I've always been a lion in the room. But suddenly I was a mouse. And my ability to lead the church just plummeted. It wasn't anybody's fault. It was the way these things unpack. I remember when it was in the throes of it, because this stuff is deadly. I can remember the days when I would go to my church and go in my office. And I used to push my chair back and sit on the floor behind my desk and rock and pray that nobody would need me that day. And I can remember when I found myself curled up in a ball underneath the desk, literally asking God to please kill me. And saying stuff like, if you're not going to use me, why don't you just kill me? One thing led to another, and I finally found myself sitting in a psychiatrist's office. Now, you have to understand, for me in those days, to go see a psychiatrist was just about the same as denying your faith. Right? I couldn't even say the word. The Lord was so merciful. He put me in the office of a man named Herbert Wagemaker. You can imagine that I called him Wage Taker and Moneymaker, never to his face. The man was so wonderful, a tall, lean man, older than me, and a young life leader in his Episcopal church. And I would go to see him. I didn't know what a psychiatrist was in those days. I thought they were counselors, and I would say, he would always talk about theology when I would go see him. And I would say, well, when are we going to do the stuff, the shrink stuff? And he said, we're doing it. I'm a medical doctor, and I'm treating your medical condition. And it took me forever to get around the fact that my mental health was a problem that could be treated medically. Now, I know for some of you this is troubling because I believe in medicine and healing. You'll be all right. You'll get sick enough to need a doctor and desperate enough to seek a priest or a healer. I remember the first time I snuck into a Benny Hinn meeting, ran into one of my church members. in the Baptist church. We looked at each other. It's like we'd been in a porn shop or something. Can't get this stuff just anywhere. After that time, it really wounded me because I thought I was really in a church that had an opportunity to really be an exploding growth church. And I blew the whole thing. Complete misery, failure in my mind, okay? But what would happen is, after I was broken, I would go to my office and somebody would knock on the door. And people would sit down in front of me and they would say, I think you can understand my problem. You got it? Well, I say that stuff because it's important, because it's part of this healing journey, and because in the midst of it, I got testimonies about physical healing as well, and that encouraged me. I was also reminded that on the Friday night I prayed for that young girl. The next day was Saturday, and it was, I can't remember, but I was supposed to go to Hobby Lobby and pick something up that was a gift. And I go to Hobby Lobby, and there's this, the section where, they got the things that I don't know, whatever it is, the stuff they've prepared, and people are waiting in line to get their stuff, and it's a crowded day. And there was a lot of grumpy people there. And I just decided I would just stand back and wait till the end. And this girl that was behind the desk was just miserable and in pain. And I could see this, right? And man, people were giving her the business. Or as Papa Jack says, they were giving her hell by the acre. and when I got up there to the front of the line, I said, you don't feel very well, do you? And she said, no. I said, what's the matter? She said, well, I have a really bad headache. And she said, I said, well, okay, you don't know this, but I pray for people with headaches. Can I pray for you? And she looked at me and she said, dude, I got drunk last night. And I'm just a mess. I have a hangover and I had to come in and I'm dealing with all these people and I'm miserable. And I said, yeah, so can I pray for you? And she was like, did you hear me? I said, I have this headache because I got drunk last night. I said, yeah, but the God I know likes you anyway. And this woman came out from behind the counter and let me pray for her. And I can remember the shock on her face when all her symptoms left her. Because God didn't heal her because she was good, but because he is good. And guess what? Then she was ready to talk to me about who are you and what do you do? Right? This is our mandate. And this is what we sent people for to Mardi Gras. And Colleen, while I'm trying to go to sleep last night, is sending me texts last night telling me about all these wonderful encounters of God revealing to her stuff about when she looks at a man and says, there's something about your 6-year-old child, and the man starts to cry. and she says, I'm having one encounter after another where I'm telling people their life and they start crying. Right? And she's like, I'm so glad to be away from church. She didn't really say it like that. I interpreted it. She was speaking in tongues, and I translated. And this is Jesus. And I want you to know something. We're going to talk about healing now and the healing ministry of Jesus and the authority Jesus had. But I want you to remember it's not the healing, it's Jesus. I want you to remember he did signs, but signs point toward the destination. He's your destination. And when I was so broken, God sent a lot of messengers, but Jesus was the destination. I now look at that and know that without that, this couldn't be. Without that brokenness, this could never be. Because you see, when I was so broken, one of the times that a knock on the door came was my neighbor just down the street, an Episcopal minister, who knocked on my door. And he said, one of these days, would you come down and let me just, I've prepared something for you. And I'm like, oh, you know, y'all know me enough to know I don't like people messing with me, right? So I was like suspicious. But he was persistent, and he called me, and I went down to his place one day, and he sat me in a chair, and he washed my feet. And he took me to the altar, and he anointed me with oil, and he prayed the healing prayer over me. And he gave me the cup and the bread. You get this? And then, I'm telling you, after this experience, I should have been an Episcopalian, because they were everywhere. Filled with the Spirit, manifesting love to me. And then I found myself in this little crazy church in Jacksonville with just like lunatic charismatics, you know, not dignified like us. And every time I would go, man, they would lay their hands on me and pray for me. Found myself finally in the office of Francis McNutt. The Episcopals weren't good enough. I went to a Catholic. And he laid his hands on me, prayed for me to be filled with the Holy Spirit. It didn't happen that day. But it was settled that it was going to happen. Okay? So all of that. So as we go through this journey, do not miss the point. Matthew 8:1, when he came down from the mountain, great crowds followed him, and behold, a leper came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. I love this because we always are saying, because we're good charismatics, we don't pray, Lord, if it's your will, but this dude did, just so you'll know. We got to knock our religion off too. Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And he stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I will. Be clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed, and Jesus said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded for proof to them. Now, sometimes I talk about the messianic secret in here, but this time I think what was happening was just practical. The guy's a leper. In the ancient world, you were known if you were a leper, and you literally lived within sometimes a quarantined area, but you always lived a quarantined life. And what this leper does is he sees in Jesus something that allows him to break out of his quarantine and go ask for help. And Jesus sees something in this leper. It's called faith. He sees this leper, and Jesus has no compunction at all about leaving the quarantine. But then Jesus wonderfully, see, not only does he heal him, then he wonderfully pastors him and tells him how to be restored to the community. You've often missed this one. We miss this point. He does this incredible miracle of healing his disease that alienated him from everyone. Oh, we had such a great opportunity. One of the turning points in history is when the AIDS epidemic broke out and our fear over the need of quarantining shut us off from people who were the objects of his love. I can't mourn over that. I can only point that out now, and I can only say it was very understandable. But people's aversion to this man was very understandable. And Jesus guides him of how to come home to the family. Now, I want you to notice that this man was also a member of the covenant community, even though he was an alienated member. All right? He was in the covenant family. And Jesus tells a family member how to come home. Now, I point out just a little note because these things are fascinating me. This is probably a throwaway for you. But in Mark's gospel, this event immediately follows Jesus' teaching in Galilee, which was Mark's allusion to the Sermon on the Mount, which he didn't quote, which he didn't recite. And so Matthew arranges his stuff exactly the same way, taking this piece that's reported in Mark and reporting it in his gospel as well. And then the next incident that happened is an incident with a centurion. And I point this out, that in Luke's gospel, for Luke, this follows, in his arrangement of his material, this follows the Sermon on the Mount. And so what Matthew did was he put them both in there. And he has something in mind here that's important for us, not just the fact that Jesus carried authority, but he has this in mind. When he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him. Now, how many of you, whether you know it or not, a centurion coming to a rabbi in the way this centurion came was as remarkable as a leper coming to him. It's just as strange. And he says he appealed to him, "Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly." And he said to him, "I will come." Same thing. I will come and heal him. And then this incredible, remarkable moment. But the centurion replied, "Lord, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word, my servant will be healed." Oh, what a great. Listen, I gotta say this. We all think that this guy's remarkable. I want you to know this guy now is just being himself. This guy really does understand how authority works. And all he did was lean over and say, it applies the same way outside of my realm that it applies in your realm. And he says it this way, "For I too am a man under authority with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, he goes. To another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does this." You guys do know that Jesus was under authority and had authority. The only way to carry authority is to be under authority. And anybody who won't be under authority won't carry authority. By the way, it happens quite often in spirit-filled churches that people say, "I'm only under God." Just nonsense. We're all under each other in some way, and we all are under authority in some way. And if somebody's not under authority, run from them. But this man says, "I also am under authority, and I have authority." Jesus says, "I always do what my Father says." When Jesus lived as one of us, he lived under authority, and he carried authority. You want to have great authority? Get under authority. It really is true. It really is true. And that doesn't mean under another, we'll talk about abusive authority another day. This is obviously healing authority, right? That's not abusive. How many of you know that? And this is astonishing. And I just simply say, faith is where you find it. Now, note this. Jesus at this point is not going to any Gentiles. And he's not letting his disciples go to any Gentiles. But a Gentile shows up, and he doesn't turn him away. This is an example of somebody saying, "I know where the food is. I'm going to eat at that table." You getting this? This is a Baptist minister on his knees in an Episcopalian church. You eat where you find food, right? And so Jesus finds faith in this man. The faith is not supernatural, but the man's recognition of Jesus is supernatural. And I love this. This man is concerned for somebody else. And by the way, Luke's gospel gives us a little bit more about this guy and tells us that all the people said, "This is a noble guy, and he's built a synagogue." And the people actually loved this man in the community because here was a man who had great authority to harm them, but they lived peaceably under him because because of the kind of person he was. Matthew 8:10. And when Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from the east and the west and recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. By the way, so we're doing our teaching on Emmaus to New Jerusalem. We're going to do a lot with Abraham. And when we say Abraham was like the covenant man in the Bible, right? And he's the father of faith in the Bible. But what most of us miss today, well, what did God promise Abraham? Well, he promised him a nation and land. No, Abraham came to understand that God promised him the world. Read Romans, read Paul's interpretation of it. He promised him the whole world. Because Jesus' mission always included the Gentiles, but the timing was not yet. And here's Jesus prophesying to the people, saying to them, this is where we're going, guys. This is where we're going. While the sons of the kingdom, and I've put those little quotations in white because that's not in the text. That's your pastor saying to you that Jesus was messing with them. While the so-called sons of the kingdom will be thrown into outer darkness. In other words, you can be at the table and not be a son. And you can be not at the table and be a son. Sons are where you find them. Because in God's economy, sons are found by faith, not natural generation. In that place, there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And the centurion said to Jesus, go and let it be done and to the centurion, Jesus said, go and let it be done to you as you have believed. And the servant was healed at that very moment. You know what this means, don't you? This means the centurion ran home and the servant was dancing. And the centurion said, when did this happen? Because that's what we do, right? When did this happen? Oh, we were talking about you right at that moment. And then the news gets back to the apostles and it ends up in your gospel. That it happened just like he said. So here are these two miracles. One of them, an alienated member of the family being brought back into the family. Another one, a stranger with no table to eat at, coming and eating at the table. And this is the gospel. This is the gospel, folks. This is our gospel. And so our world right now is filled with alienated sons of the kingdom of God. Really alienated children of God that need to come home. And then untold numbers of people who don't know how good he is. And your job is not to convince them that they're wrong, but to convince them that he's good. And you don't convince him with your arguments, but with the demonstration of power and the demonstration of love. And this is why Chuck was teaching us and trying to say to us, it's not New Life City prays. And he was calling us to go out and actually see people when we're with them. He's better at it than I am. I'm still like, we have some guys going to Mardi Gras, and I commented last night, and I'll say, Ethan Grant's not with them, but if you ever go out on the street with Ethan Grant, get ready to be embarrassed. Because he'll make 10 friends while you're trying to find one person to talk to. It's just on him, right? And the same thing with Robin Lowell down in New Orleans right now. If you go with Robin, look out, because she's going to have all the fun. So you might just stand close to her. You can catch the crumbs. So some people like that. But listen, here's how I feel about that. Not everybody can get the big catch, but everybody can catch some. I'm not great at this stuff, but I'll get some. It's very strange. I'm more awkward out there than you think I am. I'm like real fine and personable in here, and then I go out there and I'm like, oh God, why am I here? I don't want to be here. Oh. I go with Steve Stewart, and he's like, oh, aren't you having fun? Isn't this great? And I'd be like, can we please go home? He's seen me. He knows. But you can catch some. You can demonstrate the love of Christ in action and words and with healing. When you pray for people, not everyone gets healed, but they know if you love them. See, the reason evangelism is so hard is because you know that we go out there and all we do is make people mad all the time because we're trying to argue with them. But when you stop arguing, and so when I would go to New Orleans, I would just wait till somebody would come and tell me off, and then I would be nice to them, and then they would talk to me. You know, somebody would come up, I'm holding a goofy sign, and I'm feeling like an idiot. And somebody would come up and tell me, you're an idiot with a stupid sign. And I would go, I'm worse than you can imagine. I'm not, it's way worse than that. And then they'll talk to you. Because they like it when people know they look stupid. You see? You getting this? This is our mandate. And so go out there and pray for people who have hangovers. Right? I mean, it doesn't fit, right? Because how many of you like it when people get what they deserve? We just love that. We Christians just love that. We love to be able to say, I told you. Stop it. They already know that. Tell them, I know somebody who loves you anyway, and he's not your mother. I'm almost done. And when Jesus entered Peter's house, this is the third one. And I love this because here's two instances where people pursued Jesus because they heard about him. And here's an instance where Jesus just got stuck having to go here. I know, it's terrible. And when Jesus entered Peter's house, so they're at a place where Peter, his disciple, I think actually Peter moved to be near where Jesus was ministering. And when he moved, but this, by the way, tells you one thing. Peter had a wife, and because you only get a mother-in-law if you get a wife. Just saying, this is how it happens. This is how it happens. Lying sick with a fever, and he touched her hand, and the fever left her. And she rose and began to serve him. And that evening, they brought to him many who were oppressed by demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word. One of these days, I'll talk some more about casting out spirits. Anybody who knows Jesus can cast them out. And some people who don't know him, you end up casting them out. Because Jesus likes to see them cast out. We talked about that last week. And healed all who were sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. He took our illnesses and bore our diseases. Wait just a second. Didn't we read that passage? I think we read that passage. Did we read that passage earlier? He took our griefs and carried our sorrows. Hey, Matthew. We got a problem here, McGillicuddy. No, Matthew knew the whole passage. And he was crushed for our iniquities, and upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his stripes we are healed. And Matthew, going directly from the Hebrew, not from the Greek, because the Greek translated this a whole different way, going straight from the Hebrew, said this applies to illnesses and diseases. And he said, these things that are happened in order that what Isaiah said about him would be fulfilled, would be true, and so that the sign would be seen and would point to him. Do you get this? Matthew says, how many of you know that your griefs and your sorrows are illnesses and diseases also? Anybody happy with their illness? Anybody ungrieved? by their diseases. And Jesus comes and he does this. And I'm just like anybody else. I'm overwhelmed with the fact that I can't do it like he does it. But I found out that by following him, I can do it sometimes. You know I never quit fishing because I only catch fish sometimes. By the way, do you know Jesus never failed at catching fish? It's in the Bible. You can look it up. It's there. He caught them every time. You get the point? So I'm not as good a fisherman as he is, and I'm not as good at healing as he is, but I get some. And so I go for all. And when I've done that, I get more fruit than I got. And why? Well, it's interesting. We're going to go through 8 and 9, and then I'm going to take you where we're going to go. Where we're going to end up is, and he called to him his 12 disciples and did what? Gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every affliction. In other words, he said, okay, what I've done, now it's your turn. And he both delegated to them an assignment and imparted to them the ability. This is literally an impartation passage. This is Jesus saying, what I can do, you can do. Go do it. If Steve was preaching instead of me, it would sound better because he has more stories, because he does it better than I do. But it's true. And everybody can walk. Do you know what gave Jesus so much authority? So much love. So much love. And so we'll end where we ended last week and where we'll end when we're done with Matthew. So that after Jesus died and rose from the dead, Jesus came to them and said, now all authority is given to me in heaven and on earth. When Jesus walked on the earth, he walked in some authority, but when he died and lost everything, he walked in all authority. And the one who walks in all authority commissioned us to go and have some authority. No. He actually commissioned us to walk in the all authority that he has. And he says, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You know what he's saying to you? Just so you know. He's saying to them, he's actually saying to us, minister to them in the Spirit, and then you can teach them everything. We've got the idea that we can disciple people, we can teach the nation everything without giving them the Holy Spirit. You can't do it because they can't receive. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. Some days I feel better than other days. About how well I've communicated. Today, I don't know what it is. I just know that I have told you about Jesus. I don't know anything else in my life. Some of my friends over the years have been spoiled and soiled by the blows they've taken in life and ministry. And some of my friends have broadened their message and muted their voice. I don't know anything but Jesus. That's all I know. Jesus, the one who came and found me. Jesus, the one who gave me friends who could help me. Jesus, the one who's healed my diseases. Jesus, the one who came to me when I was under a desk and could only cry out to him and even to die. And he said, no, I'll let you live. Jesus, the one that lets me impart hope to people who don't have hope. Jesus, the one to whom all the signs point. Jesus. There's nothing else. Would you stand?